The following video contains some spoilers for the plot of Pokémon Scarlet, Pokémon Violet, and Pokémon Legends Arceus, so if you haven't finished those games you may want to skip this video. You've been warned. A friend of mine and I were talking recently about the endgame of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. While we were talking about what we liked and didn't like about the ending, we got around to talking about time travel and how it was portrayed in Scarlet and Violet, specifically regarding Turo and Sada's invention of a time machine. And in the ending of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, we see AI Turo and Sada travel to a different time, the past for Sada and the future for Turo. While joking around that they didn't technically invent time travel in the Pokémon universe, since Dialga is a thing, and I mean so is Celebi, it got me thinking about all of the different times that we've seen time travel in the Pokémon series before. Pokemon as a whole is definitely no stranger to the concept of time travel. I mean, like I mentioned, there's Dialga and there's also Celebi. And it should be noted that the Pokemon anime has many examples of time travel. I mean, there's the entire plot of a Pokemon movie, different anime episodes, including the one where Ash goes to Hisui. But I was more curious about the times that we've seen time travel in the Pokemon games themselves. And so, I put together this list of 5 different examples of time travel in the Pokemon games. Since I already mentioned them, Turo and Sada will of course not count here, so this list will consist of other examples besides those two. First on this list is the Time Capsule, and we're going back to Generation 2 here, and this was actually, as far as I know, one of, if not the first instance of time travel of any kind mentioned in the Pokemon series. And it's funny to me that the series has been toying around with the idea of time travel since way back in Generation 2. But we're specifically talking about Bill's Time Capsule. This was a machine that Bill invented that in the Pokemon universe made it so that you could trade Pokemon with trainers from the past. In-game, this allowed players to trade certain Pokemon from Generation 1 to Generation 2. This was actually the only way that you could get Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, and a bunch of other Pokemon from Generation 1 not available in Generation 2. And similarly, the Time Capsule also allowed you to trade Pokemon from Generation 2 to Generation 1. With a few exceptions. According to the lore, in order not to compromise the space-time continuum, Bill set some restrictions on the time capsule, and if you're going to be trading Pokemon from Generation 2 to Generation 1, you cannot trade Pokemon that were not in Generation 1, and you cannot trade any Pokemon with moves that did not exist in Generation 1. Obviously, this is because Gen 2 Pokemon and Gen 2 moves were not coded into Gen 1. But I love that they gave an in-universe reason for not being able to trade new Pokemon back to Generation 1. And that if you send back a Pokemon with a move that didn't exist, it could screw up time and space, and we might wind up with a world in which Pokemon rule over humans. Remember that for later. Next on this list is Legends Arceus, and this one is still pretty recent, so I am going to throw up a spoiler warning here again for the plot of Legends Arceus, but it's something that happens right at the start of the game, so maybe not too big of a spoiler. But anyway, the plot of Legends Arceus involves time travel right from the very start of the game. In Legends Arceus, you seemingly play as an older version of the main character you played from Diamond or Pearl, and Arceus just decides to fling you into the distant past of the Sinnoh region to a point in time in which it wasn't even called the Sinnoh region yet. It was called the Hisui region. Arceus then gives you a cell phone and, much like Professor Oak told us to do once upon a time, tells you to go catch every Pokemon. Doesn't mention if you'll make it back home, but who needs home when you've caught them all? Also, I find it super funny that Dialga, the Pokemon embodiment of time, is not the one to send you back in time. Way to step all over Dialga's toes, Arceus. You aren't even technically the only time traveler in the game, as throughout the game, space-time distortions occur around the Hisui region, opening up portals in time and space that all sorts of Pokemon pop out from, including Porygon, which is a present-time Pokemon that definitely should not be in the distant past. But you also aren't even the only human time traveler in this game, as Ingo, a character we last saw in Generation 5, has also been flung into the past and has lost his memory. You may recall a very similar thing happening to another character in Pokemon Sun and Moon, Annabelle, but I think that's a little different since she traveled to another universe technically. Speaking of Sun and Moon though, third on this list is the Ultra Ruin Dimension. This one is super eerie, but I'm also kind of cheating here since it doesn't exactly involve time travel per se. But I'll let you be the judge of whether or not it counts. In the post-game of Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, there were these Ultra Wormholes that you could use to travel to different places in Ultra Space in order to catch Ultra Beasts. A few of these Ultra Wormholes gave us glimpses into the places and dimensions where Ultra Pokemon originally came from. promise that's the last time I'm gonna say Ultra. However, there was one such wormhole that gave us a glimpse into a possible future for the Alola region. This wormhole would lead you to a Hau'oli city that was in complete ruin. It's actually a really creepy scene. There's toppled buildings, there's a terrible dreary looking sky. It looks like the site of an experiment gone wrong, and it's heavily implied that that's exactly what happened. There are only two things you can interact with in this future world. A Guzzlord who you can battle and catch, and a man who's wearing a Guzzlord spacesuit who is apparently Guzzlord's caretaker. And this man's dialogue gives you a little insight into what happened to everyone. He makes mention that people abandoned the planet and assumes you're a resident who returned to the planet for some reason. The fact that he brings up that people left the planet suggests that this event happened on a planetary scale, not just to this parallel version of Hau'oli City. Whatever it was that happened, it's kinda creepy to think about. Second to last on this list is the Team Rocket / Giovanni event from Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This was an event that by bringing a special Celebi to the shrine in Ilex Forest, Celebi would suddenly show up and transport the player 3 years into the past. And soon you become privy to a conversation that was going on between Silver and his dad. His dad, you know, the leader of Team Rocket, Giovanni. After this encounter, Celebi once more just flings you through time, only this time you arrive in a cave around the time that Team Rocket is taking over the Goldenrod radio tower, just in time for Giovanni to hear Team Rocket's broadcast to him. You then battle Giovanni, and after winning, Celebi flings you back to the present. This was a really interesting event because it established backstory on Silver and Giovanni's relationship, giving us more insight into Silver's character and his feelings towards Team Rocket. Because throughout the game, he has this constant hatred towards Team Rocket, and it was great to see time travel actually be used by a Pokemon in-game. And number 1 is the Time Gate Traveler series. And this one is really great and might actually be one that you may not have been aware of. I'm slightly cheating here again because it doesn't technically involve time travel, but this is way too interesting not to mention. So, in Pokemon Black and White 2, there was a minigame of sorts that you could play in which you could make a movie with your Pokemon. There was even green screens that you could use. One such movie you could make was the Time Gate Traveler. The plot of the movie revolves around a professor trying to build a time machine to go into the future. Sound familiar? Isn't that wild? Pokemon already had a time-traveling professor story in their pocket to use way back in the Black and White era. And this time travel plot gets really crazy. In the sequel that you can make, the professor actually arrives in the future, and the world of the future is actually run by Pokemon instead of people. Like, the professor legitimately runs into a talking Pokemon who engages you in a Pokemon battle, but instead of using a Pokemon to battle you, they use a human to battle you. And the Pokemon is surprised that you are using a Pokemon to battle a Pokemon. What the hell kind of crazy future world would that be? Like, does Turo know where he's going? You know, because he hopped into that time machine. Does he really know what he's doing going into the future? But the Time Gate Traveler series is pretty crazy. I definitely recommend looking it up if you can, or if you happen to own Black and White 2, play it yourself. It's pretty bananas. And that just about does it for this list. This was a really fun and interesting video to make. There were a few instances here that didn't technically count as time travel, but were definitely worth mentioning. In particular, the Time Gate Traveler movie and its sequels that you can make in Black and White 2. I genuinely didn't know anything about that, so it was really interesting to research that. Anyway, this has been Charizos, and thank you so much for sticking around to the end. That is all I have for you. Have an amazing day. Alright, so let me get this straight. Talk to me. So your name is Dialga. Yep, that's me. And you can time travel? I surely can. So you've seen future Pokemon? Bro, I've been there. I've seen them. It's like, whoa. What? Future Delibird?